Welcome to Jesus Talks. We're in our 12th study as we conclude looking at the background to Jesus Christ. Well, there are other figures around Jesus in the biographies who are of great importance. We know about the 12 disciples, and we will consider those soon. But there are also this group of women who are surrounded with controversy, legends, rumours, and speculation. They are often ignored completely in mainstream discussion of the life of Jesus. Yet when we go back to these original eyewitness accounts, their presence is impossible to miss. Let's remind ourselves of the opening words from the 8th chapter of Luke's biography. After this, Jesus travelled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who'd been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household. Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. So perhaps the most surprising fact there is that Jesus and his 12 disciples were being bankrolled by these women who supported the work. We often like to follow a money trail to figure out the roots and motivations of an organisation. And here, the trail leads back to a disparate group of women. Judas Iscariot seemed to administer the communal purse on a day-to-day basis, which was unfortunate because he was actually stealing from that communal purse, as John tells us in his own biography. But these women seem to be managing the finances on the bigger scale. So there is this interesting story about the collision between the sincere devotion to Jesus from one of these women, Mary, and the cynical self-interest of Judas. So John 12 from verse 3, Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You'll always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Now in Matthew, we're told that at the death of Jesus, there were many of these women watching. But he focuses attention on 3 women who were watching. First, Mary Magdalene. Second, Mary, the mother of James and Joses. And third, the mother of Zebedee's sons. Now, Zebedee's sons are 2 apprentices of Jesus called James and John. If we compare Mark's record of this event, he agrees that there were this group of women watching, but he also zooms down to the same 3 that Matthew mentions. However, Mark gives slightly fuller information or different information about these 3 women. He lists them first as Mary Magdalene, second, Mary, the mother of James the younger and Joses, and third, Salome. So Mark specifies which particular James that the second Mary was the mother of, and James, who was nicknamed the younger, the son of Alphaeus, who was another one of Jesus' apprentices. But Mark also names the third woman, the mother of James and John, as Salome. So Mary Magdalene is accompanied with two mothers of Jesus' disciples, his handpicked disciples. Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Salome, the wife of Zebedee, who was the mother of James and John. So this paints a much more intimate and close-knit picture than is often assumed. When Jesus picked these apprentices 3 years before his death, the mothers of those apprentices came along with them and became trusted key people in the inner circle of the Jesus movement. Luke doesn't specify which women were present at the death of Jesus, but John picks out a different moment when Jesus' mother Mary came to join Mary Magdalene with John himself at the cross. And then another Mary, identified as the husband of Clopas, was also present. So, according to the eyewitness accounts, although Jesus' closest male friends and supporters abandoned him at the time of his trial and death, with the exception of John, yet many female supporters remained with him. We can list his mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the wife of Clopas, Mary, the wife of Alphaeus, the mother of James the younger, and Salome, the wife of Zebedee, mother of James and John. Now, some of the confusion and popular myths that go around clearly come from the fact that there were 4 different women, all called Mary, in that immediate circle of friends and supporters and advisors. In fact, there was another woman called Mary who had a sister called Martha, who lived in a village near to Jerusalem called Bethany, and there's the story of her in Luke 10 from verse 38. It's possible that this Mary is the same as one of the other Marys, but it is hard to know for sure who is who. When we read the accounts carefully, it's not too hard to pick out who was there and who they were. But in the clouds of confusion and mythology that have collected around Jesus and his death, these figures have sometimes been built into almost like legends. For example, a couple of 100 years after Jesus' death, there was a new religious movement that suggested that Salome had special secret knowledge that Jesus had shared with her, and that only the members of this Salome sect had preserved the secret knowledge. And the same kind of claims have also been made about Mary Magdalene. In fact, Mary Magdalene has been the centre of all kinds of myths and rumours. For example, it is commonly taught as fact that she was a prostitute, or at least that she had been a prostitute. Now, there's not any mention of this in the biographies or eyewitness accounts. It could have been that people might have wanted to dismiss her or write her out of the story in later years, and they thought that if they portrayed her as a prostitute, they could sideline her because she was clearly quite an important member of the inner circle of Jesus's closest disciples. But when we go back to the original accounts, there's nothing about Mary Magdalene being a prostitute. In saying this, we don't want to suggest that Jesus didn't mix with prostitutes. One of the most remarkable things about Jesus of Nazareth himself is the way he was happy to spend time with the very people that the religious establishment hated, or at least they stayed away from in public. Privately, there's certainly the hint in that story at the beginning of John chapter 8 that these Pharisees were much more implicated in this world that they officially condemned. But Jesus was friends with prostitutes, and he still is. But there is no evidence that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. However, this Mary did have a difficult history before she met Jesus. Luke and possibly Mark explained that Jesus had driven 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene. We're not told how these 7 demons had possessed or if there were any physical symptoms associated with those 7 demons. Nevertheless, the fact that he delivered her from them might help to explain not only why she was so convinced about the identity and mission of Jesus, but also why, having endured so much, she was so strong in the hard times. Why is she consistently referred to not simply as Mary, but as Mary Magdalene? The most likely explanation is that she might have come from a village on the edge of the Sea of Galilee called Magdala, in which case she is constantly referred to as basically Mary from Magdala. But the word Magdala in Aramaic means tower or strong, and it is perhaps maybe as least as likely that she was simply known as Mary the Strong or Mary the Tower. There's a lot to be said for that. And that maybe is in fact the best explanation of the facts, because she's consistently first in lists of the supporters of Jesus. She is explicitly named as not only remaining with Jesus throughout his death, but also she is the first to see the resurrected Jesus. She was the strength for Jesus' mother Mary while she watched her son dying. And if Mary Magdalene had been such a tower of strength for Mary, and then for her son Jesus, in her faith and her clarity about the scriptures, her understanding of what was happening, then we can see why he spoke to her and appeared to her individually after he rose from the dead in John chapter 20 from verse 1 right through. And that's John's lengthy account of this meeting between Mary Magdalene and the freshly resurrected Jesus. Well, in our next study then, we'll begin to see the first things that Jesus did as he began the 3 years of public work that changed the world.